my name is Elana Casey. I'm known as Asha Elana Casey. That's the name I use as my artist name. I am born and raised in DC. I am currently based in Chevy Chase, Maryland, where I make my work and my practice. My work is centered on godliness and the preservation of African American culture, particularly our spiritual practices in the South. So when I make my work, I ask my subjects, what is your God self? Who do you want to be? What is the greatest iteration of you? And so I take that information and I cultivate it into a portrait because I believe the art outlives us all. So if we are essentially the folks in folklore, how do we then play up the storying that is so traditional in African American culture and even African culture, like the idea of creating stories to tell narratives of who people are and how they exist in society. And so when I got to this piece about my brother, it's actually a part of a triptych. It's a part of a triptych of my dad and my two brothers. So my dad is in the center. And so initially I was going to make a body of work about him being from Chatham, Virginia. And so I was going to take his upbringing, and I was like, well, if we're storying, what if I make you the king of Chatham, Virginia, right? Here's a portrait, it's going to be big, this is you. If all of humanity did not exist, no one would know that you weren't the king of Chatham, right? So I think about artwork as a way of telling stories about civilization and culture. And so when I was like, Daddy, what do you want to be? What do you want to, how do you want me to paint you? And he was like, well, actually, I want to be the king of the world. And I was like, oh, okay. And so we went with it, right? So the titles of the works are very instrumental in regards to how the subject wants to be seen. And then when you go into the artwork, you still have that elevation. So you still have the rhinestones and the teeth, the glass, the glitter, the shine that comes with riches, right? Which comes from this understanding of a higher class, even though they are a simpler material, which is interesting, but it's that shininess, right? When you see shine, you associate it with precious material. And so when you look at the work, it seems like they're in power poses, they're very regal and they have strength in their nature. But then if you look at their cloths tell a different story. And it's not necessarily a lesser story, but it's a story of who they actually were. So if you look at my brother Jonathan, you'll see that he has two cloths. He has one that is gold glittered tobacco leaves, which is my dad comes from a family of sharecroppers. And so his grandparents lived on a land in Chatham, Virginia, and they picked tobacco. It actually was a joke. I made a piece about it in my solo show. It's an abstract piece. My cousin Lewis, he was like, we're going to take you down to Virginia, you could pick tobacco, because that wasn't that far from them. That was maybe, I guess 40 years is a long time, but it was maybe 30, 40 years removed from that history of picking a farmed material that would have been farmed during enslavement, right? And so I thought it was really interesting to put that aspect of our story into his cloth. And then also my dad's grandmother was a basket weaver. And I was really interested in also having that pattern, that carving, being displayed in the work as well. So when you look at the tobacco leaf and the pattern, it's a curved wicker-like pattern that goes alongside the leaves. And so when I started making these ancestry pieces, I was really thinking about lineage and story a lot. And how can I put lineage and story into cloth as we move forward, giving a nod to how in African cultures they have a family cloth. What does that look like if we have a family cloth? What is what is that comparison, that parallel? And I immediately thought of like African American quilts, like also during like that enslavement period, and how that is our cultural cloth, right? And so I looked up the different pattern types with like those cloths, and that's how I constructed my mom's cloth. So if you look at like the wicker one with the tobacco, that's my dad's cloth. So if you ever see another piece in the series, you're going to see like both of my brothers with my dad's cloth. And then when you look at my two brothers, we have different moms. So my brother Jonathan, me and him have the same mom, but my brother Elton doesn't. But their moms are from the same, but our moms are from the same place. And so the cloths are very similar, but they're a little different in some of the details in regards to like heirlooms that his mother has kept from generations. So that's included in his cloth, right? So I'm using these cloths to really tell a story about who we were. If we look at my mom's cloth, which is the patterned one with the red and the blue triangles in it, you see like the Moloch emblem, which is my mom's maiden name. And so there's like this silver circle with an M on it, and that's like her emblem. I don't know if you see a crab, but there's a crab on there too. And then there's also tomatoes. Where she grew up, she picked tomatoes like outside of her garden in her house, right? And it was such a significant story to her, because she was talking about how there was a horned worm that scared her away from her job. And I was so interested in just kind of bringing those things into like her pattern. And so if I don't write it down, or if I don't tell you that all of these different symbols are here in the story, then you wouldn't really know, right? But these are things that my family would be able to recognize. They'd be like, oh, this is from this is from this. And I thought that was so beautiful. And so when I go to paint other people, I'm thinking about like, well, what are some symbols that they'd recognize about themselves? I'm really trying to put a mirror to them, but I'm not only looking at a mirror of them, but also a mirror of their spiritual history and their spiritual lineage. And I'm uplifting that and having a conversation of what does it mean to be immortal? Like artwork is really a way of honoring our ancestors and having like a sense of immortality, right? And so if I love you, I would like for you to live forever, right? Like it's me coming to terms with death. What does death mean? And how like our culture and our symbols are the things that don't truly die if we're like intent on preserving it as a community, as a population. So with that being said, do you have any questions? Also, and thank you.